I will admit that our gospel reading is a little confusing. The parable that Jesus presents and teaches on seems to leave you head-scratching, and if you read it 3 or 4 times, you might come with 3 or 4 different conclusions about what Jesus is trying to say. In the words of Bob Dylan, what I think Jesus is trying to say is you got to serve somebody. It might be the devil, it might be the Lord, but you got to serve somebody. What I think is a healthy way to look at this parable is not to try to insert God or Jesus into it, but to look at verse 9 as the reason for Jesus telling this parable. We get this story. This manager, who obviously hasn't been doing a very good job, so his boss, the rich man, says, hey, I'm going to fire you. You're not very good. You're going to have to go back to being slave labor or begging for money. And so he gets some money back for the master. But not only does he get some money back for the master, but he does so in a way that the people he's going to go back to are going to welcome him with open arms. Sometimes this parable is heard as a positive story that Jesus is telling, but I disagree. When we look at the second part of verse 8, where they talk about acting shrewdly, for the children of this age are more shrewd in dealing with their own generation than are the children of light. What Jesus is saying is that the people of this time will take this story and go, look at what a great job that guy did. If he was a banker, he'd be arrested for fraud. But look at what he did. He got some of that money back that he was already bad at getting. So I want us to really see this parable, to hear this parable, not as God or Jesus or the manager about who we are to be as disciples, but of a cautionary tale from Jesus. Instead, it's a warning about who we give our money to and an instruction to who we are to give it to. Now, the gospel writer of Luke thought one thing about money. It's tainted. At some point in time, money has the ability to turn us away from God. You know, just today, our confirmants were talking about the first commandment, you shall have no other gods. And greed, in its most basic form, it's a sin of idolatry. It's a sin of thinking money. If I put my trust in money, if I make sure that my pot's always full, everything's going to be okay. It doesn't look at what can happen, which is, who allowed you to have that money? Who allowed you to be comfortable? Who allowed you that financial security? Was it all your own worth? Was it all your own merit? Or was it God who created you that allowed you to come into this world? So Luke, the gospel writer, always saw money as tainted, as something that can pull us away from following Jesus, that can pull us away from truly following God. And so, put that into verse 9. Jesus says, and I tell you, make friends for yourselves by means of dishonest wealth, so that when it is gone, they may welcome you into the eternal homes. When Luke is talking about dishonest wealth, he's talking about money in general. It's all dishonest. It's all tainted. So instead of being like the guy who tried to save some people some money for their sake, Jesus is saying, no, for my sake, for the sake of God, take that money and give it to the people who need it. When Jesus has said, very truly, I tell you, make friends yourselves by means of dishonest wealth, Jesus is saying in a very mixed way, give your money, the money that you don't need to survive, give it to those who don't have money to survive. Or more simply, make sure you're taking care of the poor. That you're giving that wealth that can taint how you view God and how you view this world. Make sure you're giving it to the poor. And then in the second half of the verse, we get a very interesting prospect. This idea of if you give someone who needs money, some money, not with the intention of them paying you back, but just so that they can have something to live off of. Just so they can have that lighting bill paid for, like the Good Samaritan Fund has done before. No, we can't be repaid back. But Jesus says so that when it is gone, that wealth is gone, those people, those friends you've made, those poor you've helped, may welcome you into the eternal homes. May welcome you into heaven. May welcome you into the kingdom of God. It's an interesting, I know it's a little heady, but it's an interesting thing that perhaps it is those with money who can help the poor today, and it is the poor who will be helping those with money when we are in the kingdom of God. When we're in the kingdom of heaven, when we're in our eternal homes. God always talks about flipping things on its side. And so what would it look like if we actually did recognize that perhaps there's a greater role God plays for those without money, for those who struggle to live on themselves, that they're not just a diatribe on our economy, but that actually someday when all of us are reclaimed back into God, we see they have a greater role than even we do to welcome us into our eternal homes. Does that change how we think about those who can't afford to pay for things themselves? Does that change how we feel about government assistance? Does that change how we feel about federal programs that help give people housing even though they can't? And our tax dollars pay for the rent instead of ourselves, or charities pay for the rent instead of themselves? I think it does. I believe Jesus is setting up this parable as what not to do. The only reason this man was acting shrewdly was so that he wouldn't be condemned by the people he served. But what Jesus says is, no, what I want you to do is do this for me. Do this for God. Do this out of the love of God for all people. Help those who need it. And be very sure that those people that you're helping will be the ones welcoming you into the eternal home, into heaven someday. This kind of fits into our theme, which is happening in November. We're going to have our stewardship drive for the 4 Sundays in November. And our theme is Thanksgiving is Thanks Living. Thanksgiving is Thanks Living. And what that means is that when we are thankful for what God has provided us, the gifts we have, the abilities we have, the abilities we once had, when we think about all the things God has equipped us with, our strengths, our weaknesses, the things that make us us, and we're thankful for them. When we're thankful for the money we've been able to accrue, that's allowed us to live, to continue to breathe, eat, drink, to be out of the rain. And most importantly, when we're thankful and we think about the gift that Jesus Christ has given us on the cross, salvation, our very lives, not just the things we have or the gifts we have, but our very lives. When we're thankful that God has provided us all of these things, and from that, we give to those who need, to those who are struggling, to the church who also seeks to help out those same people. When we give out of that thankfulness, that is when we are living in the promise of Jesus Christ. That is when we are making friends so that they may welcome us into the eternal homes. That is when we are being children of the light rather than the children of this generation. And that light will shine. Shine, shine, shine for this tainted world to see. And so we commend to God, we ask God, we pray to God to help us so that justice in this world may flow like streams, like the great Mississippi, like the tiny Edwards River, that justice can flow in this world and that people can truly be taken care of. And while I've been talking and preaching about it, I invite all of us to do this together now by singing hymn 717.